Cool. So first of all, thank you very much for coming along. This is our third meeting, speaking of the five powers. And since many of you are in the US, a few of you are my Australian friends. And so it's morning here, Monday morning in Australia, and then evening in the US. And often, for those of you who know me from Australia, I like to start daily sessions or just any session with a few minutes of reflection, correcting a motivation in terms of refuge and bodhicitta. So I thought of doing it in conjunction with the five powers, and the five powers begin normally with what we do, the way that we correct the motivation in the morning. So it's evening now in the US, but it's still okay to correct a motivation, even if it's in the evening. And so I think that I will probably, let's do maybe 5 or 10 minutes meditation. Something that accords with, the format will be something that will accord with the way that we correct the motivation using the five powers. And then you can maybe use that as a baseline. And in your personal meditation and reflection, do whatever you can in order to make it richer. I mean, so I think that we start our Buddhist involvements often with guided meditations. So this is how we learn to meditate. This is how I learned to meditate. I did a few courses with Thupten Chodron that lives, I think, now at Shravasti Abbey in the US. So that was, I think, back in the 90s. And I really liked her guided meditations. And then I've listened to a few guided meditations with Sangye Kadro and other teachers. So it's a good baseline. But then once we become confident, we can also make our meditations richer by thinking of what is, I guess, more suitable to us. What is our disposition? What are the things that we're working with on a daily basis? So, feel free to use whatever we do here together and then build upon that according to what works for you. And so to begin with, let's just take a couple of seconds, or maybe a minute, half a minute, to settle our mind down. And so if you're sitting on the floor, if you're sitting on a chair, if you're sitting on a sofa, in your kitchen, in your lounge, in your meditation room. So it's good to start with maybe taking 2 or 3 deep breaths. And to think that we're drawing our mind back from a busy day. We're drawing it inwardly. Becoming aware that we're sitting here and we're sitting on a cushion or a chair. Our legs are touching the floor. So there is a contact of a hard surface and another hard surface. And when we draw our attention to the meeting point between our bottom and the cushion and the floor and the legs and the floor, try to sense whether you can clearly distinguish between the floor and your body. In the sense that, can we completely isolate and identify where our body stops and the floor begins? I will quickly scan our body from our toes all the way up to the crown. If you find any point of discomfort, tension, you can release it gently with an out breath. or with your mind, bring some softness and gentleness into that particular spot, beginning with our toes and the back of the feet. So again, any tension, just release it gently. And then moving up to our shins and our knees and our thighs. And to our lower abdomen. Keeping our chest open, allowing the breathing process to occur completely naturally without forcing it or manipulating it, changing it. So if we're breathing heavily, deeply, that's okay. Or if the breath is shallow, that's okay too. And let your shoulders drop at ease. And also infuse your palms and your arms with softness and relaxation. Sending our attention to the face. Keeping our mouth slightly open, the tip of the tongue is resting upon the upper palate. And often we hold a lot of tension in our jaws or the meeting point between the two jaws. So gently, as much as you can, try to let it go and release it. And soften your cheeks and your eyes. And if you find that you're holding any tension in the creases in your forehead, allow your forehead to completely melt. And so if we quickly observe the body as a whole, we might notice that there is a better quality of relaxation and ease spreading throughout the body, making it suitable to support a mind that becomes more internalized and more focused. So we'll use the breathing process to make a mind more stable and quiet. So we'll count a round of 21 breaths. Each breath consists of breathing out and breathing in, using each breath as an anchor for a consciousness or a mind that becomes more and more focused. And so at the beginning of our session, reminding ourselves that we have fantastic external conditions for developing our mind. We have incredible spiritual teachers to care for us. So we can think of not only His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Kyabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche, but also many of the geishas and the lamas that care for Thupten Nobuling, Geshe Sherab, Geshe Sopa, many other teachers, Tibetans, non-Tibetans, providing us with excellent conditions for mental transformation. And we also have the internal conditions, freedoms and richnesses that make it possible for us to be attentive, to be receptive, to have an open mind, to enjoy the teachings of the Buddha. It's so hard to find such cause and conditions for external and internal conducive conditions. Thinking about it from the viewpoint of the causes that produce a precious human rebirth. The very foundation for that is having guarded pure ethical discipline, having abstained from the 10 non-virtues as much as we could. So thinking of this life, we can assess how easy or how hard it is for us to guard pure ethical discipline, abstaining from the 10 non-virtues. Then we also had to supplement that with the practice of the 6 perfections, just such as generosity, and to link it up with a positive state of mind, calling it stainless aspirations, positive state of mind, virtuous state of mind, being on the verge of death. So it's not easy, it's actually quite hard. But we have done it before. And we hope to be able to do it again at the end of this life. But we have to be prepared. For death is certain. Why would death not come to someone like me, like us? It will certainly come, and every minute that passes, every second that passes, we're taking one step and then another step, getting closer and closer to a deathbed. We have so little time in between for a solid and genuine and heartfelt Dharma practice. And so the time of death is uncertain. There are so many conditions around us. Some of them are just insignificant, slight, but it can still cause our death. And our body in itself is a mechanism by which it will just keep escalating and deteriorating. We cannot make it better and better. We can try to be healthy, eat well, have a healthy diet, exercise, and so forth. But the body still goes from bad to worse. And at a time of death, there would be nothing that would be of help apart from whatever habits, positive habits that we have created in this and previous lives. Our friends will be left behind, our family members will be left behind. The possessions, memorabilia, whatever we have accumulated in this life, all of it will be left behind. Either distributed amongst others or being chucked to the garbage. And our body will also be disposed of. And we certainly don't want to end up in a miserable state of existence, experiencing terrible pain, but also fear and danger and panic. but also mental cloudiness, vagueness, not being able to really assess what a situation is and what will be positive and beneficial long term. It is likely that we will mostly be preoccupied with thoughts about food and shelter, mating, protecting a territory. And so we think, I don't want to be born in a miserable state of rebirth, when not only I will not be able to take care of myself long term, but also I don't want to experience great suffering. And I don't want to be in a state in which I don't have access to the Dharma. Even if I meet spiritual teachers, incredible lamas, I won't be able to understand them. I won't be able to understand the Dharma. I won't be able to practice the Dharma. So I don't want that. And also thinking that even if I'm born in a good state of rebirth in samsara, at most, maybe I will live for 100 or 200 years. 200 years sounds fantastical. So let's say 100. I will have to do it all over again. Birth and death and birth and death. And other challenges and difficulties that come in between. Sickness and aging and not getting what I want and getting what I do not want. Looking for something, not being able to find it. And having no certainty whatsoever in many different areas of my life. So I don't want to have this. I don't want this. And also thinking of all those who are close to our heart. Those that we might see daily, living with us as family members, our dear friends, relatives, colleagues, and so forth. They're just like us. Each and every day, we face different challenges, big or small, that creates some disturbance in our body and mind. And we react to them in a similar fashion, deep inside not wanting to have them, not wanting problems and difficulties and pain and suffering, but thinking, I want to feel some comfort and happiness and health, well-being. I want to be satisfied. I want my life to have a meaning. Some meaning. So everyone around us, friends, enemies, strangers, all of them are the same in seeking happiness and well-being and not wanting suffering and pain. And so if we only take care of ourselves without taking care of others, thinking of the vast number of other living beings, and just one single I or me, we are not important than others. My happiness is not more important than the happiness of others. And accomplishing my happiness at the expense of others is not fair. It is not honest. In some sense, it is quite crude. And so we think, rather than taking care only of myself, as much as I can, I will try to take care of others. And the best way to take care of others is for myself to become Buddha, completely unlimited in my capacity to be of benefit to others, with maximum knowledge of everything that exists in the most subtle and profound way, to have boundless love and boundless compassion, to be able to teach the path to those who do not know what the path is, having that incredible ability. And so to do so, we rely upon the teachings of the Buddha, so we can visualize the Buddha in front of us, surrounded by Arya Bodhisattvas and our spiritual teachers. And we think that the Buddha, the teacher, not only Buddha Shakyamuni, but also the one that embodies all the Buddhas that has ever been. All the Buddhas that are around us at the present. The Buddha also embodies all the Dharma, the Hinayana and Mahayana Dharma. But more fundamentally, the mind of the Buddha, the Dharmakaya, is a mind, a consciousness in which all faults have been completely eliminated and all positive qualities have been developed to a fullest extent. And the Buddha is also an Arya Sangha, leading the way to all the other Arya Sanghas surrounding the Buddha. And so we rely upon them, thinking that in the future, it depends upon that, may I be able to develop true paths and true cessations in my own mind stream. Become an Arya Sangha, become a self-Buddha, to be of maximum benefit to others. And so, as we go for refuge, we think that not only we go for refuge so that we'll be able to attain the state of Buddha, but also in our daily life, every little virtue, small virtue that we perform, that we do, protects us from some form of suffering that will lead us in the future to true paths and true cessations in our mind. So may I be able to do that in going for refuge, and also may I be able throughout the day to do whatever I can in order to contribute to my own awakening to Buddhahood, to be of benefit to others as much as I can through generosity and ethics and patience, joyous effort, concentration and wisdom. And if I cannot be of help to others, at the very least, may I not harm others. Not intentionally, but hopefully also unintentionally. May I be able to observe my mind all the time, and as soon as an affliction arises, be able to put a stop to it. That's my plan for today. And so with that, we can begin a session with reciting the verse for Refuge and Bodhichitta. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. By the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. By the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. By the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right, let's start. Sorry, I promised to keep it for 5 or 10 minutes. I think that we've gone for like 20 minutes meditating, but I guess it's not time wasted. But nonetheless, I apologize. And so I'm wondering if you can make me a co-host, please. It's okay, Paula, no worries. No problems at all. Cool, thank you. And so, all right. Host disabled participants screen sharing. All right, so let's go without that. So, in the previous session, we spoke about refuge. We spoke about the way that we can extensively go for refuge and also develop bodhicitta as we start our daily routine, our daily practice. And as I said, we all find ourselves in different walks of life, and also different periods of our life. Our mind might be really attentive and open to a long Dharma practice, but also there are periods in our life in which we're busy. Our life might be really busy. All good for screen share now. Thank you. Our life might be really busy, but also our mind might be kind of really busy. So we do our best, right? Our best in different periods of our life. And what we cannot do for the time being, don't worry about it. We don't need to kind of beat ourselves up. We don't need to add more problems and suffering on top of what might be present for the time being. And so we begin our day with Refuge and Bodhichitta. And as I said before, I try to spend a lot of time, maybe, I guess at the average, 20 minutes, half an hour, at least meditating on Refuge and Bodhichitta every day. It's not enough. Definitely it's not enough, but we do whatever we can. And so we think of not only in general going for refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, but we include with that our intention, our wishes. We don't want to be born in a miserable state of existence in the next life. We don't want to be, long term, we want to live samsara, cyclic existence. We had, in some sense, we had enough. We had enough of all the problems and sufferings until within cyclic existence. We do have happiness, pleasure, and so forth. We do experience that. No, we cannot deny that there is some comfort and pleasure and some relaxation and also some satisfaction that we have in a daily life. We have that, but it never lasts. At some point, it either becomes dissatisfactory, problems arise. Worst case scenario, whatever we experience now, later on becomes something that is painful. And so we don't want that. But also, currently, we're totally limited, let alone not being able to be hugely beneficial to others. Often we cannot really decide what's going to be beneficial for us, most beneficial for us on the long term. So we are quite limited. We're limited, at least from a Mahayana perspective, we're limited because we don't have perfect knowledge of everything that can be known. And the inability to know everything is attributed to what we call obscurations to knowledge, or cognitive obscurations. They are the imprints of our own ignorance. And so long as we haven't eliminated all of the imprints of ignorance, we'll still be limited. And so we think this is my main enemy. My main enemy are my own obscurations, but in particular, the ones that prevent me from knowing everything that can be known, so that I can not only be of benefit to myself, but also so I can be of benefit to others. So then we also include that in our refuge, thinking that I don't want to remain in a state in which I'm still incapable of being beneficial to others in the best possible way. And then we also set our intentions for the day. So here, the 5 powers are a Mahayana practice. So we're seeking to attain the state of enlightenment. We're wishing to attain the state of enlightenment for the sake of others. So that's a general intention, but also we want to bring that intention into whatever we do during the day. So this is not easy. We use the power of habituation and also the power of imprints, the power of white seeds, in order to be able to do it better and better as time goes by. And so we train during the day, sometimes in just having reminders, mental reminders. So sometimes it's often to put notes around the house, on the fridge, remember to be kind, remember to kind of cultivate patience, remember the Buddha, remember the Dharma, remember the Sangha. Some people that I know also have set reminders on the phone, right? So every hour, every 2 hours, kind of spending 1 minute thinking, what's happening to me now? What's happening to in my mind? It's not easy always to do it, because you might have a conversation with friends, with colleagues. You might be doing something at work, having some work meeting with others. So it's not always easy to say, just a second, stop. I need to look at my mind. I need to check what's happening. I need to apply antidotes. It's not always possible, but still, there are ways in which we can use our external environment, phone, fridge, what have you, in order to have some things that we can hook to in order to remind ourselves of our initial intention. So we can do that. And then, so we think that during the day, in general, I want to be as beneficial as I can to myself, but also, of course, to others. This is a Mahayana intention. But at the very least, I don't want to harm others. And we can harm others in so many different ways, particularly when disturbing emotions, afflictions, start to operate in our mind. they inflict injury upon us, and also they create damage to others. So I think that one important thing in general, and I see that in me, is to be able to, first of all, recognize afflictions as they arise. If they're already there in a full force, it's really difficult to stop them. I mean, when I think of my mind, there are days in which I'm irritated. Mainly when I'm tired. When I'm tired, I become irritable. And so sometimes it takes just for a slight thing to just completely tip me off. It's like, if I don't recognize those situations where I already know that my mind is unhappy, it is almost like guaranteed that I will get angry at something. And when I get angry at something or someone, they're just like a conduit for my frustration to come out. And so, as Geshe Langyen Tampa says in his 8 verses for training the mind, in all my actions, I will observe my mind. And as soon as a disturbing emotion arises, I will forcefully confront and avert that. So I can actually connect it with maybe another verse that is found in Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. It's in the 6th chapter, the chapter on patience. I think that it's verse number 6, in which Shantideva speaks of the causes for anger. And he says that the fuel of anger, the cause of anger, is mental unhappiness. So we sometimes conflate between being upset and being angry. It appears to us that being upset about something and being angry are almost the same thing. But I think that when I think of what Shantideva said in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, that cause and effect. So there's something kind of happening to us. We're unhappy about something. There is displeasure, unhappiness. We don't feel comfortable in ourselves or with the environment. The next step would be anger. And so Shantideva says that if we really want to put a stop to anger, this is where we need to start. We need to start with recognizing discomfort, displeasure, some pain. If we're able to first of all, identify that and apply some antidote to that mental discomfort, not being able to work out what's happening and not being able to contain the situation. If we're able to already deal with that at this point, we'll be able to arrest anger, maybe to prevent it from arising, or at least if there's already a bit of anger, to put a lid on it. If anger is already manifest in full form, it's almost too late. So Paula says, chapter 6, verse 6. Thank you very much. And so when anger is already there, it's already too late. And the same thing also with attachment, or with attachment in to different things. Either attachment to possessions, to money, to food, sexual attachment, and so forth. When it's already there in full form, it's hard to put a stop to it. It already has, with anger and attachment, when they're present in full form, they also affect our body. And I think that probably many of you, maybe all of you, have noticed how, through meditation, how when anger is strongly present, it's just uncomfortable in the body. The body is completely on edge. We're on edge. The body is uncomfortable. There's sometimes tightness in the chest. We feel that unless I do something about it, unless I move, unless I strike something, I will not be able to contain that anger, and it is painful. And with attachment, is like this feeling of great thirst, but also a comfortable and uncomfortable feeling. And with both of them, there might be this idea that they're there to protect us. So anger is helping me because it's protecting me from something, or that attachment is also helping me because it's going to give me pleasure. It's going to give me comfort. It's going to give me security. If I'm going to get what my attachment tells me, it will make me happy. And so if they're already there in full form, it's hard to put a stop to them. But it's not that we need to give up and not do anything about it, but we can recognize that when they're strongly present, it's really difficult, because otherwise, if we don't think about it like that, I think that there's a danger that we'll become completely disappointed or disheartened by our attempt to put a stop to it. I mean, I remember that a couple of years ago, there was kind of a personal challenge that I had to deal with. And, I think that the resentment was already there, install kind of resentment to someone. It was already there in full form. And I was trying for a few days every day to think about it from a different perspective. But since I've already let that happen, it was way more difficult. It requires way more effort to try to put a stop to it, or at least to reduce it. And so we take up in our daily practice through the power of habituation to start to recognize afflictive states of mind as soon as they arise, and then to try to put a stop to them. So that also accords, I think, with the intention that we might set for the day with the 5 powers, the power of intention, and then habituate our mind with that throughout the day. And for that, to be able to do that, we need to be able to recognize what afflictions are. So within the FEMT study programs, for example, one module that we study is a module on mind and mental factors. So there are at least, I think that there are 6 groups of mental factors, which altogether coming down to 51 main mental factors that operate in our mental consciousness. And of them, there is a group of 6 root afflictions and 20 secondary afflictions. Some of them are quite technical. Some of them might seem to be a little bit laborious, but many of them are crucial. So we have the defining characteristics of anger and resentment and wrath and spite and deceit and dissimulation and so forth. So it's good just to know what the defining characteristics are in order to then think of what's happening to me now in my mind. Is it anger? Is it wrath? Is it spite? Is it belligerence? And so forth. And then if we know that they are there, or they're about to pop their head up, we know that there's already something that I need to do about it, because the next step would be full-blown anger, maybe, or full-blown attachment. So when we start to do it, I think that in the first few weeks and months and years, we can't do it well. I mean, it's impossible to do it perfectly within a week or a month or a year and so forth. But over time, I think, if we, monitor our mind over 10 years or 15 years, 5, 10, 15 years, I think that we will see some progress, hopefully. And so I think that we then can connect it with the power of repudiation, which is the 4th power. So often this power is called the power of remorse or the power of regret, because remorse and regret are, which are actually the same thing, let's say, one of the 4 antidotal powers that we use in the process of purifying negative actions that we have done before. And often when we look at an explanation of the 5 powers, it is said that in the evening, at night, just before we go to sleep, or I think that maybe thinking about it as just before we go to sleep. Let's say that we go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. So 9 o'clock, let's say, we have some meditation session, which kind of trying to think of the passing day, the things that we have done today. We try to purify negative actions that we might have done, and also to dedicate all the positive things that we were able to do, to rejoice in them, and also to decide that tomorrow we're going to do better. And so part of this evening practice in which we do a purification practice includes regretting negative actions. So often it is called the power of regret. But the word that we use in Tibetan is sunjing, which is not precisely the word for regret. The word for regret is gyöpa, right? So sunjing and gyöpa. And sunjing in Tibetan means to expel, to repudiate, to chuck something out. So we can, of course, chuck negative actions, negative karma with regret. Of course, that's what we're doing with the practice of purification. But I think that if we think of repudiation or the power of expulsion as something that is, I think, bigger than just doing a purification practice. We want throughout the day to expel, to chuck out any negative emotion or negative trait that we have. And particularly, I think that since we're discussing in Mahayana practice, we can repudiate, to try to chuck out as much as we can self-grasping and self-cherishing. The conception of self, which is ignorance, that is working together with cherishing ourselves. So, in general, in the teachings of the Buddha, grasping at a self, thinking or our ignorance, which believes that I exist completely in and of myself, independently, objectively, as if there's something here within the makeup of my body and mind that is completely independent, as if it is solid, it is concrete, it is floating in midair. It doesn't depend upon anything. It's not suspended by strings or something. It completes it exists here completely in of itself. It's something that joins our attitude, our mind, our way of thinking all day long, and even in our dreams. So we don't think about it in a very rational way or very kind of clear way, but it's easy to recognize this solid sense of self that arises in our mind when a certain situation arises during the day. So someone either pushes a button, right? So maybe someone is accusing us of doing something or is giving us what we do not want. They do not give us what we want. They prevent our happiness and so forth. They blame us for something that we have not done. Or it can also be identified in positive situations. Like, for example, if we think of, for example, being told now that in half an hour we have a private audience with Lama Zopa Rinpoche or with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I mean, this is excellent. If we get to do that, perfect. So there is if you imagine someone telling you, giving you the message that now you're going to have a private meeting with His Holiness, there's great kind of excitement that comes out in my mind, and we think what will I say? What will I do? What do I need to do when I enter the room? There's a sense of excitement and also a sense of a little bit of fear. And so there's a strong sense of I or me that arises in our mind, and the sense of I that appears as if it is independent. There is an independent, objective, in and of itself, from its existing from its own side, I or me that exists here. And so this is what we call grasping at the self. Of course, we also have a similar attitude that arises with respect to others. Someone is giving you something that you do not want. They're pushing your button. The very existence is something that is completely annoying, and you cannot tolerate that. So they also appear to you also in a similar way. So there is you see kind of the body, a person appears in front of us, and there is that idea that arises in our mind that there is a certain core, certain essence to the person that is independently, objectively, inherently annoying. As if the annoyance is not in our reaction to that person. It is not that our mind becomes annoyed. It is that the annoyance is within that person. The whole purpose of the existence is completely to ruin our day. And so we have that with respect to other people, but also we have that with respect to the things that we enjoy or the things that we do not enjoy. It's like, for example, my happiness is within my cup of coffee. My happiness is within the chocolate cake that I will have after this session. I don't have a chocolate cake in my fridge, but anyway, this is where my happiness is. And so, we have that idea that things exist objectively. This is what our ignorance tells us. So we want to repudiate that. I mean, the whole, Buddhist teachings, it is said when we look at the teachings, the section of teachings pertaining to the Madhyamika view, the middle way view. And also, let's say, again, if we spoke of Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, at the beginning of the 9th chapter, in the first verse, Shantideva says, all the branches taught before were taught for the sake of generating wisdom. Also, I think that it's in Chandrakirti's supplement to the Middle Way, a certain section that says, all the teachings that Buddha taught directly or indirectly lead to the development of wisdom that eliminates ignorance. So in all ways, during the day, we want to repudiate ignorance, to repudiate ignorance and invite wisdom, but it's not easy. I mean, to do so, we need to, first of all, build our understanding of what it means, what the conception of self is, what is grasping at the self, what is the way to develop wisdom, what is the meaning of emptiness, what is the meaning of looking for something and not being able to find it. There's a lot of, first of all, information gathering, knowledge gathering that we need to do. And then we need also to think about it and reach our own conclusion. And then we take it on into our meditation session. So it's a long process. It's not easy, but it's also quite exciting. I think that 10 years ago, we've had the fortune here at Repudiating Institute to spend 2 or 2.5 years on studying Chandrakirti's supplement to the Middle Way. And honestly, that was, I think, probably the most important or significant maybe years in my life, or definitely the most wonderful topic I've ever studied. If I get to study again in the future, wonderful. It's often like that, by the way, with many of the things that we study, at least in our Buddhist, I guess, studies. We take up something, might be really complicated in the first time. Then next time that we study it, things become easier. It's like watching, I guess, Fight Club or Memento again and again, and picking up on all the things that we haven't picked up before. And so we deal with this attitude of grasping yourself during the day. I will kind of say a few words about it soon, but also we deal with our own self-cherishing. And so self-cherishing, there are different, let's say, different types of self-cherishing. Some of them are absolutely evil. Some of them are not necessarily mistaken. Thank you. So some of them are not necessarily mistaken, but still from the Mahayana perspective, we need to rid ourselves of that. And so thinking, for example, often when we receive teachings explaining the differences between the Mahayana approach and Hinayana approach, I think that in general, it is said that Hinayana practitioners are practicing their aim, their objective is to attain the state of liberation for their own sake alone. Whereas from a Mahayana perspective, we want to become Buddha in order to be of benefit to all living beings without exception. And so, since our approach to begin with, the Mahayana approach, and we think that I don't want to attain the state of liberation for my own sake alone, I want to become Buddha, it almost sounds as if attaining the state of liberation for our own sake alone is a complete mistake. It is a distorted state of mind. So indeed, from a Mahayana perspective, we don't want to have this attitude, but is it really a mistake? Like wanting to attain the state of liberation, can we say that it is a mistake? If we recognize that samsara, a process in which we are born without having any control, that the control is within karma and afflictions, is it a mistake? Is it a wrong consciousness? Particularly when we think of this type of Buddhist practitioners, which are called arhats, which means those that have attained the state of liberation. So to become an arhat, which means a liberated person, you need to have completely eliminated ignorance. In order to have completely eliminated ignorance, we need to have realized, or a practitioner need to have realized emptiness perceptually, a direct realization of emptiness. It is a gigantic project. It requires a massive accumulation of merit and wisdom in order to develop a direct realization of emptiness. And also without the wisdom side, without the method side, the wisdom will not be developed. And so often when I think about it, merit is this, I think kind of often we have a kind of this vague idea of what merit is. It's not often identified in a really precise way. So when we speak of merit, we said that, for example, a person that has merit will be successful in all their undertaking. If you have merit, you'll be successful. If you don't have merit, even if you're smart, you're not going to be able to achieve that. So that's a really general explanation. It doesn't really tell you what it is. Then another explanation of merit is merit versus, as the accumulation of merit. And the accumulation of wisdom is, the accumulation of merit is the thing that is mainly responsible for accomplishing the form body of Buddha. And the accumulation of wisdom is that which is mostly responsible for attaining the Dhammakaya, the Dharma body of Buddha. So again, kind of we have a general description of the role, the function of the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom, but it doesn't really give us a very precise definition, something that we can isolate in our mind precisely. And so when I think of sometimes my attempt to think of what merit is, I also think about it as the momentum, the driving force that will cause me to realize emptiness. If I'm not going to have that momentum, my mind is not going to kind of move forward and in an unstoppable way to perceptually realize emptiness. There would be things that will act as roadblocks for that. And so to gain that momentum in my mind, I need the method side. And the method side consists of many different things. But often we speak of love and compassion. I mean, if we have love and compassion to others, our mind will be moving forward in wanting to eliminate ignorance, so that we'll not only be able to be of benefit to others, but also we'll know what to do in order to abstain from harming others, harming ourselves and harming others. And I'm saying that in relation to arhats because it is said that, well, definitely arhats have eliminated their ignorance through the development of wisdom that realizes emptiness. Also, in the Hinayana, there's such a great emphasis on meditating on the four immeasurables. So developing immeasurable love and immeasurable compassion and immeasurable equanimity, immeasurable joy. May all sentient beings, or may immeasurable sentient beings have happiness in the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering in the cause of suffering. May they be never be separated from soulless bliss. May all of them abide in equanimity, free from attachment to some and hatred to others. Right? So this is something that is deeply practiced, not only in the Mahayana tradition, but definitely also in the Hinayana tradition, which is, I think, one of the driving force for doing everything that they can in order to develop wisdom. And so I connected with self-cherishing. So can we say that someone that is attaining the state of, has attained the state of liberation, became an arhat through the development of not only wisdom, but also having meditated on the four immeasurables? Do they have a wrong consciousness? Are they wrong in thinking, may I attain the state of liberation? Well, I don't think that you can say that it's a mistake, but still, from a Mahayana perspective, we want to do better. And that we still recognize that it's not fair, or it's not good enough to just attain the state of liberation, considering that there are many other people that are close to our heart that are still in that there's samsaric mire. It's not to say that Hinayanists do not do anything for the sake of others. I mean, if you think of someone that has meditated for a very long time on immeasurable love and compassion and equanimity and so forth, definitely the love and compassion that it will have to others would be way greater than my love and compassion, the one that I have to others, considering that I'm not liberated. Definitely I'm not enlightened, but I'm also not liberated. So this is definitely not kind of playing down the great qualities of Hinayanists that have meditated on that for a very long time. So, but still from a Mahayana perspective, kind of this wish to attain a state of liberation, just for my own sake, is limiting, but also not right, considering all other living beings. So let's say that there is one level of self-cherishing that I wouldn't call it positive. It's not kind of wanting to attain the state of enlightenment, the state of liberation only for our own sake. It's not positive, but at least it's not detrimental. It's not negative. The negative one is to think that my happiness is more important than others. This is kind of this is mainly this type of self-cherishing that we need to rid ourselves of. I mean, of course, we need to rid ourselves of this happiness, the self-cherishing that is only seeking our own state of liberation. But currently, the main type of self-cherishing that we want to rid ourselves of is the one in which we think that it doesn't matter if others are hurt or harmed, so long as it makes me happy, or so long as I get what I want. Paula?
Thank you, Venerable. I have a slightly oblique question.
All right.
Let's say, well, does it, at the end of the day, whether we come in or we believe or we think or we are Hinayana or Mahayana practitioners, do we have a say in the outcome? So two quite distinct questions. And is the eventual actual outcomes, the two objectives that appear to be so different, are they actually different? That's it.
All right. So that big questions. I think that they're big questions, and therefore I think that I can say a few things that come up in my mind now, but it might not be the kind of full picture, full answer. And so I think that to begin with, we have a say, and the say, I think, that begins with our intention. Now, our intention is either to become Buddha, or our intention, if I got your question right, so our intention could be either to become Buddha, or our intention could be mainly to attain a state of liberation. And those intentions are distinct, and they also bring about a different type of intentionality into our practice. In that, for example, when we are motivated by Bodhichitta, the mind of enlightenment, which is a mind that is cherishing others more than cherishing ourselves, we are committed to practice the 6 perfections, but also to practice the 6 perfections for all sentient beings without exception. So the number of living beings is immense, which are the objects of our practice. The number is huge, uncountable. We're willing to do that for as long as it takes. And from a Mahayana perspective, from the Sutra perspectives presentation, it will take us maybe 3 great countless eons. How much an eon is? There's a number 2 that I think that we spoke about it not long ago. I think that it was like maybe 1 with 60 zeros after that. So 3 great countless eons, it will take us to attain the state of enlightenment. So we're also kind of projecting an intention that is thinking, for as long as it takes, even if it takes 3 great countless eons to accumulate the collections, I will do that. And also, I will continue to work with other living beings which are ungrateful. I mean, ungrateful in the sense that we often say that, there might be someone that we're trying to treat that person in a nice way. We're trying to be kind. We're trying to be respectful. And yet, despite our efforts, they are treating us in a way that is really unkind. They're not grateful in that sense. So thinking that not only I have to work for a very long time and practice the 6 perfections, which are quite hard, even as far as, when we think of, for example, the perfection of generosity. So there's the giving of material things, but also there is generosity of giving away our body. So even if we give our body, sentient beings, some of them are unkind, so they will respond in harming me rather than being grateful. And so this intention that we bring into a practice, at least from a Mahayana perspective, is kind of way more extensive than the intention that you will have as a Hinayana practitioner. Now, when Hinayana practitioner is reached, then when we look at it from the point of view of the end result, the state of liberation versus the state of enlightenment. So the state of liberation, definitely, hands down, amazing. I mean, this is not to belittle the elimination of ignorance. Imagine, we can only imagine how it would be like, first of all, to have no ignorance, but also how it'd be like to have a mind that will never, ever be affected by anger. There is no possibility for anger to arise. Never, ever having any sense of attachment or jealousy and pride and so forth. Having a mind that is completely quiescent with that oozing sense of happiness and well-being, that's incredible. So attaining the state of liberation is incredible. But then it's still different to the state of Buddha or Buddhahood from the point of view of that a Buddha has far better ability to be of benefit to others. And so often, again, I think that when we look at scripture and the general description of Hinayana versus the Mahayana, it is said that Hinayanists, when they attain the state of liberation, this is the way that it is described. They say that they remain for a very long time absorbed in the bliss of that peaceful state in which all afflictions have been eliminated. Whereas a Buddha is always absorbed on emptiness, on reality, but also while being absorbed in reality, a Buddha forever acts for the benefit of others, particularly through knowing their dispositions. So currently what makes it impossible for us to be of perfect benefit to everyone is not knowing what are the dispositions of others. Now, I can, for example, here we have, we meet together, we discuss the Dharma together. You don't know my disposition, and I don't know what are your particular dispositions. We share the Dharma in general, and it might be helpful to some people, but for some people it might be not the most beneficial presentation, and it's because all of us are limited. I'm limited. I don't know your dispositions, and therefore I cannot give you. I cannot speak to you in a language or in a way that will be absolutely perfect for you. And so a Buddha has that ability because a Buddha eliminated all obscurations. So if you just attain the state of liberation, you don't have that ability. Only a Buddha has that ability. So to attain the state of liberation means that the difference between liberation and Buddhahood is that to attain the state of liberation, we need to eliminate ignorance. If we eliminate ignorance, we also eliminate all the other disturbing emotions. So that's the first thing, ignorance. And the second thing is called the seeds of ignorance. So we distinguish between three things here. So we have ignorance, the seeds of ignorance, and the imprints of ignorance. So ignorance is a consciousness. There are different types of ignorance. Ignorance of not knowing, simply not knowing something, or ignorance which distorts reality. Things exist in one way, ignorance makes of them as if they exist in a way that is completely different, fictional, false. And so ignorance is a consciousness. Now the seeds of ignorance are those that produce latter moment of the same consciousness. Like, for example, currently when I'm talking to you guys, I'm not angry. I mean, honestly, I'm not angry. I don't hate you. But I have seeds of anger in my mind. They can give rise to anger in the future. They can give rise to hatred in the future. So those seeds are not, those seeds are not consciousnesses, but they are potentials. So not only, bye-bye Nitya, thank you. So not only I need to eliminate anger and attachment and ignorance as consciousnesses, the main thing that I want to do is to eliminate the potentials for them arising in the future. So To attain the state of liberation, what we need to do is to eliminate afflictions or disturbing emotions, which are consciousnesses, but more importantly, they're seeds, the potentials that can give rise to future disturbing emotions. To attain the state of liberation, this is what we need to deal with. To develop wisdom, the wisdom of emptiness, and to develop wisdom that perception realizes emptiness, is to develop the antidote to afflictions together with the seeds. So we're still left with the third thing, which are imprints. So what are those imprints? Well, imprints are those that produce mistaken dualistic appearances, which means that currently when I look at you and you look at me, there is an appearance that dawns to the mind as if you and me appear independently, in and of ourselves, objectively, from our own side. So the thing that is responsible for these factors of those mistaken dualistic appearances of true existence are called imprints. So imprints produce appearances. Everything that, when we look at around us, when we look at ourselves, on perception of self, but also when we look at everything else, everything appears as if it exists truly in and of itself. We are not familiar, we haven't had yet any appearance that is different to that. And not only we have things appear to us as if they exist independently, the next step is to completely buy into that. We wholeheartedly, we embrace those appearances as if this is reality. There is no other way for reality to exist other than to exist independently. So we buy into that presentation. And so to stop those appearances of true existence, of inherent existence, we need to eliminate the imprints. So then, going back to your original question, Paula, what's the difference between liberation and enlightenment? If that, I think, what was part of the question. Well, to attain the state of liberation, we need to eliminate ignorance and the seeds of ignorance, those that produce future consciousnesses which are afflictive. If we do that, that's an incredible feat. That's amazing. We're liberated. But even if we are liberated and we don't have ignorance, there's still appearances that dawn to the mind. And those appearances of independent existence appear because of imprints. And so those imprints, you can say one function of them is to produce those mistaken appearances, but also another function is they prevent us from knowing everything that can be known. This is what we call obscurations to knowledge, or cognitive obscurations, those imprints. So if we want to become Buddhas, which are omniscient, we have to eliminate cognitive obscurations. To be able to know the dispositions of everyone else, this is what we need to eliminate, the imprints of ignorance. And so from a Mahayana, not only a Mahayana perspective, here kind of in Tibetan Buddhism, we study different philosophies, Buddhist philosophies, different tenets. But it is said that the final one is Madhyamika Prasangika, the middle way consequent school of thought. And so according to the middle way consequent school of thought, there is an order by which we eliminate our obscurations. We begin with things which are easier to eliminate, afflictions together with the seeds. So ignorance, anger, attachment, and the potentials for those consciousnesses that give rise to future moments of those consciousnesses. We eliminate them. Once we finish eliminating them, then we start to deal with things which are more difficult to eliminate. These are the imprints, obscurations to knowledge. And so I think I maybe gave a long-winded answer to that. And I'm wondering, does it help or does it clarify?
Extremely helpful. Thank you so, so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And so then going back to the power of repudiation. And so during the day, what we want to do is to repudiate or to expel an attitude of cherishing ourselves, and also to expel a strong sense of self-grasping. And often they go hand in hand, particularly when afflictions arise, when anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, and so forth arise. For us, we have the full package of self-cherishing and self-grasping. Anger arises and we think, how dare they do this to me? How dare they take this away from me? How dare they disturb my mental happiness? How dare they cause me pain? And so there's, first of all, we can say that, first of all, there's an emphasis on me, my happiness, which is more important than others. But also, when we think of how they do this to me, there's a very strong sense of conception of I exist independently in and of myself. So they come together, self-cherishing, self-grasping, particularly when strong afflictions arise. So we want to reduce both of them. When we reduce one, the other will also become reduced. And so I think that one of the key points for that is to recognize them from being what they are. I mean, particularly when anger arises, as I said before, if it's already strongly present, it's hard to stop. If attachment, passion is already kind of in full force in our mind, it's very difficult to put a stop to it. But at least over time, when anger arises, we can remind ourselves, this is anger. Calling it by name, what I feel now is anger. It's already here, and therefore I haven't stopped it before it came to be. But just to recognize it for being what it is, not only to recognize it for being what it is, but also to know that this is not good for us. Anger is not good for me. Attachment is not good for me. They perpetuate my future suffering. They keep me in cyclic existence. They're harming me. And through that, I also harm other living beings. To keep on reminding ourselves that again and again and again over time, just the mere thought of them being present and also them being negative, over time will have a power to reduce the efficacy of these afflictive states of mind. I mean, sometimes kind of when I think of situations that I encounter during the day, if I find myself being a little bit irritated or even sometimes angry, sometimes kind of I think that, well, what is present now is anger. And when this is what anger causes my mind to do, it causes someone to see as being inherently evil. All my problems are in the other person. All my problems, my unhappiness is in the situation. So it completely skews my perception. And sometimes just to remind myself that, it kind of gives me a chuckle. It's like, again, I completely bought into that presentation. There's something that appeared to in my mind, I completely bought into it without questioning it. And of course, when sometimes someone is harming you physically or verbally, and you get angry. So when you say, again, I bought into that presentation, it doesn't mean to say that there's no one that is harming you at the moment. That another person might still be being abrasive, being rude, being angry, and is having a go at you. That's definitely can happen. But sometimes I have a chuckle, at least in relation to myself, and thinking that, again, this self-grasping and self-cherishing are strongly present. And therefore, rather than trying to work with that situation to develop compassion for that person, to develop patience towards that person, to think of me having created before the karma to experience that situation. So I also played a role in that situation. Rather than thinking about it like that, again, I completely bought into what anger tells me. So just that kind of mere recognition of those afflictive states of mind have the ability to maybe try to put a lid on them. Over time, I think that when we try it at the beginning, it's hard, it's difficult, but over time, we develop a better ability to do it efficiently. So we recognize them for being what they are. And also we recognize that what currently present is my own self-cherishing. Again, calling self-cherishing, knowing the disadvantages of self-cherishing. As it says, I think that I think it's in the Guru Puja. Cherishing myself is the doorway to all torments, while cherishing others is the foundation of all that is good. So there are many, Shantideva, when he explains, I think it's in the 8th chapter in his Gata Bodhisattva Way of Life, when he explains the way to develop Bodhichitta through this practice of equalizing, exchanging self with others. He gives the listener a few verses of the drawbacks of cherishing ourselves. He says that, for example, cherishing ourselves is the mind of a demon, the mind of a ghost. There's this list of drawbacks. So we think of when we react to a certain situation, we can recognize self-cherishing and then think that this is a disadvantageous situation or state of mind. Long-term, it prevents my own Buddhahood. And then try to at least put a lid on it through hopefully developing an attitude of cherishing others. If we can take away the focus from self-cherishing into cherishing others, the emphasis on the self will be weaker. And so the other part of that equation, our conception of self as independent self, would also be reduced. If we put a lot of emphasis on ourselves, this is not suitable for me, this is not right for me, I do not deserve it, I do not want it, and so forth, self-grasping would be massive, monstrous. If we then focus on others, take away the focus from ourselves on others, the self-grasping would be weaker. So that's taking care of this self-cherishing, repudiating self-cherishing. Then the other part is repudiating self-grasping. And so to repudiate self-grasping, grasping at ourselves and others and other things to exist in and of themselves is, you can say, somewhat difficult, because it, to do it well and to do it better, we need to have spent some time studying and, having studied it and reflected upon it and also meditated on it. So, we approach it in different ways, different points in time in our life. But I find that one thing that is helpful to me is to remind myself, particularly in those situations, that things do not exist in the way they appear. There's a certain presentation that our mind sees. I experience pain, and the presentation is if pain is coming from the outside. It's not in the way that my mind sees a certain situation. It is not dependent upon my own karma, which means actions that I have done before. It is not dependent upon my interpretation of the scenario. It is completely coming from the outside. And also with happiness or comfort or pleasure and so forth, the presentation is that it is coming from the outside, not in my experience of the situation. My happiness is only an external, it can only come from the inside, not from my mind. But also kind of more fundamentally, more, on a more subtle level, there is an appearance as if things exist in the way that they appear, in that they have they exist independently from the on-side, objectively. I don't know if they're good, they're objectively good, inherently good. If they are negative, they're inherently negative, they're inherently bad. And so to repudiate, to use the power of repudiation during the day, is also to remind ourselves again and again that things do not exist in the way that they appear. And so, for example, when someone is harming us, this being abrasive, so they're saying a negative thing, they're acting in a negative way, well, we can think that things do not exist in a way that they appear. It does not mean to say that we are not harmed. It does not mean to say that another person is not having a go at us. It does not necessarily mean that. When we remind ourselves in a negative situation, when someone is insulting us, that things do not exist in a way that they appear, my way of thinking about it is that my anger, my irritation is making me think that that person in front of me exists inherently. Inherently, their function is to annoy me. Inherently, the function is to create disturbance in my life. And so when I remind myself that things do not exist in a way that they appear, I use that in order to decrease the objectifying consciousness that objectifies them as inherently good or inherently bad. And the other side of it is when we think that they do not exist in the way that they appear, is to think that while they appear inherently, they're actually dependent arising. In that the person in front of me or the situation that I deal with is not inherently fixed. It is liable to change. So first of all, they depend upon cause and conditions. So when, if there's a way for me to change some of the cause and conditions or some of the features of the situation, I'll be able maybe to make it better, to react to it better. That's one level. Another level of dependency is that something is a dependent arising because it is imputed or labeled independent upon a certain basis. And so we experience a difficult situation. Another person is harming us, and our mind is calling that person, in general, in the Buddhist tradition, we call it an enemy. Not often, we call people enemies, but certainly they're out there to harm us. So, we might call them a jerk or an idiot or whatever. Sorry for my language, but this is how we call them. But our mind also objectifies them as existing in this way. And so we think that things do not exist in the way that they appear. So that person is not a maniac, is not inherently a maniac, is not inherently an idiot, but it is my mind that calls them in that way. If my mind called that person by a different title, ascribing a different title to that person, I'll be able to react to that person in another way. So for example, rather than calling that person a maniac, if I impute the label a person that has no control, that is controlled by karma and afflictions, a person that is actually worthy of having an attitude of care. This is a process of labeling that comes from my consciousness. They are dependent arising because they're not an idiot from the onside. They're actually an object of care imputed by my own consciousness, imputed by my own mind. So things are imputed onto a certain basis by language and conceptions. And so it's not easy because this person that is punching us, harming us, insulting us, undermining our position or what have you, it's very difficult to be absolutely compassionate towards that person and to kind of to hey, have a go, give me a hug. It's difficult to do it, of course, but bit by bit, we can change our perspective in reminding us that things do not exist in the way that they appear. We become reactive on the basis of trusting that things exist as they appear to our mind, independently, objectively, and so forth. But if we change our perspective, we can react to that in a different way. And also we'll be able to maybe stop harm, even if not on the short term, we'd be able to do it more efficiently on the long term. And by the way, kind of with respect to stopping harm, then, even though, we might experience harm inflicted upon us by another person, if we change our perspective, it does not mean to say that we do not act in order to prevent that harm. We can put a stop to a person harming us without getting angry at that person. So let's say that someone is being rude to us or being inappropriate to us at work or in our family and so forth. We can think that this is not a way to behave, and recognizing also that they cannot help it themselves because they're controlled by karma and afflictions, in the sense that they do not harm me because they have control. They harm me because they have no control. I can still put a stop to that, but without becoming angry. I can still protect myself, but also I can protect myself in thinking that the person has no control. So I think that I recently had a conversation with a good friend of mine, and she was diagnosed with autism lately. She's in the mid-50s. It was an interesting situation. Apparently, identifying someone with autism is more common in boys rather than girls. So the marks for diagnosed in someone with autism were tailored mainly for boys, but girls display other attributes of autism. And so she said that for during many points of her life, she experienced certain difficulties. She wasn't able to keep jobs. She wasn't able to work in some places, and she was the difficult person. That was the label that she got, the difficult person. But also she had a certain perception of herself. But then once you know that that person is on the spectrum, having autism and so forth, the reaction is just different. It's not that they're inherently difficult. They have difficulties, but you can work with these difficulties, because if cause and conditions, if certain cause and conditions are changed, certain cause and conditions are altered, manipulated, or what have you, it can work so much better for the person, but also yourself in reacting to that. It's like, for example, when you know that someone is insane, and I say insane is insane, and they abusing you verbally, you are likely to either not be affected by what they say, or at least in a different way, to just someone that using the same language, right? So if you have someone that is close to you and they're calling you an idiot, or someone that that are mentally insane and they're calling you idiot, you'll have, I guess, more forgiveness. You'll be able to tolerate someone that is labeled as insane. And so when we then use the power of repudiation during the day and reminding ourselves that things do not exist in a way that they appear, not only they do not exist independently, but they depend upon cause and conditions. And in the case of people that are being nasty or hostile to us, we can think that they are controlled by karma and afflictions, and therefore they behave towards us in that way. But also we think that if I change my attitude towards them, I'll be able to change the way that I experience my situation. Not only the way that I experience it, but also to be able to put a stop to it in a way that is way more efficient. Wondering if you have any questions?
Maybe it's Lisa here. Maybe a comment. One of the challenges I find, so I understand at least intellectually what you're saying, but certainly find it very challenging at times to put it into practice. And I think the challenge I find is, where do you, if you like, and there's no absolute answer, but where do you draw the line? You recognize those things, and you recognize that a person may be engaging in particular conduct or behavior that is harmful to yourself or others. You understand that comes from various causes and a whole range of things. You may understand that there's diagnostic issues behind it, or karmic things or whatever. But where do you stop and go, I need to put a boundary in place, and remove myself, because maybe I don't have the capacity yet to do some of the things, or to the degree that it's outstripping my capacity to be compassionate, and so I'm getting angry, and maybe I need to remove myself, or from the person, put a hard boundary in place, because actually my anger would cause more harm to the whole situation, including myself, the person, etc. And without kind of blaming the person, just accepting I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I need to still practice, cultivate, do more work, but I need to remove myself at the time being. And I guess I asked that question in the context of, particularly within Dharma communities, I kind of see a lot of other person's your Buddha, they're your teacher, blah blah blah. But it's actually some, and I don't mean from teachers necessarily, but I see it as sometimes like a denial, like people use it as a, I don't know what to do, so I'll bury my head in the sand, that person's causing harm, and excuse the very harmful behavior that people are perpetrating. It could be other, Sangha members, like lay students and so on. Under the guise of kind of what you're saying. Do you know what I mean? Like, I see a lot of that, and I personally find it very frustrating, because in my work life, and I guess my personal life, from a lot of my work has involved like the prevention of abuse on vulnerable populations and so on. Very acutely aware of issues of domestic violence. I work in the disability sector, where there's very significant harm perpetrated against vulnerable people. And I've worked with perpetrators in the disability sector of harm. That's been my kind of speciality. So you get the gist of.
Yeah, I think the question has many kind of, to answer it. I mean, you can probably spend weeks and months in kind of looking at different bits and details, pulling them out, and developing strategies with dealing with that. So it's a really big question. And I think that also many of us in different parts of the world, kind of what you say is also very much echoing our situation here in Australia, in a Dharma center in Australia or other working environments. So, it's a very big issue. I think that I can say a few things, kind of thoughts that come up to my mind, but certainly it's not a big kind of the big or complete picture. So first of all, Vasubandhu in his Treasury of Knowledge says that there are two things which cause our afflictions to arise. One of them is close proximity to an object, and then that's the first one, close proximity to an object of affliction. And the second one is paying an incorrect mental attention to it. And therefore, afflictions arise and proliferate. So then when I think of what Vasubandhu says, I think that since the first one is close proximity to the object, on a very, I guess, initial or fundamental level, when we cannot deal with a certain situation, but it's personal rather than affecting, it's not affecting other people, let's say, around us. It's not about safety. It's not about law and so forth. Just on a very basic level, if we find that, currently, at least today, I just can't deal with that, it's okay to step back. To step back and say, I can't deal with that now. I'm just going to remove myself from the situation. So that's kind of on a very basic level. But then when a mind is strong enough to deal with the situation, then in that situation, kind of when we're facing that person, that annoying person, and so forth, we can then become more proactive, and then see if we can change our minds through the practice of love and compassion and patience and so forth. But that's in general. But we cannot be just happy clappy. We also need to be practical. Kind of being like a happy clappy Dharma person is not always the kind of the smarter thing to do. It's kind of, sometimes it's classified as idiot type of compassion. And so our responsibility is, particularly when we think of, thank you very much, Paula. So our responsibility is, particularly from the point of view of the Mahayana Dharma, is not only to protect ourselves, but to protect others. And to protect others, we have, in our society, we have, first of all, codes of conduct, but also procedures in workplaces, in Dharma centers, laws in the countries that we live in, and we need to function according to those codes of conduct and procedures and laws. And we have response, protocol for response to verbal abuse, sexual abuse, disabuse, other abuse. We need to use those things. Often, sometimes what I find in certain situations, particularly, most of my experiences here in Chenrezig Institute in Australia, I've been here for 17 years, is that we sometimes apply, I wouldn't say an overly compassionate approach to a certain conflict, but we, rather than using the procedures that have been developed, we think that I just want to practice forgiveness or patience or what have you. But then we have to think whether it can create long-term damage and bring only short-term benefit. So I think that first of all, we have to kind of know those codes of conducts and rules and procedures, they have a purpose. And if we're not going to use them, or if we're going to use them sometimes, it's going to be probably more detrimental. So it's our responsibility actually is to be, to make sure that we act in a responsible way to prevent harm in the future. I think that 20, maybe it was 20 years ago, I stayed in Ireland for some time at the Buddhist center in Ireland, and I stayed for a few weeks, and I've noticed that we had a community dinner every day, and I've noticed at some point that every night, at least half of the people that were having dinner with us were people that came out of either mental institution, being hospitalized. That was kind of the theme for many of the dinners. At some point, I thought to myself, well, you want to be of benefit to others, definitely. You want to kind of be also help as much as you can to people that go through difficulties. Is it a role of a Buddhist center then to be an asylum for people that have emotional issues? Is it not only our responsibility? Can we do it? Do we have the skills? Do we have the skills to take care of others? Am I a professional? Do I know how to what to say at the right time? Do I know how to diagnose when someone is going through a difficult time, emotional time, and then needs a more proactive approach? I don't have those skills. And so, I think that sometimes allowing such situation to occur without kind of saying that actually this is not something that we can deal with, that we have the skill to do. But also, if centers turn into sort of, I wouldn't say asylum because maybe the word is not right. But if that would be the theme in our Buddhist centers, it will prevent maybe other people from coming in. So we need to find balance, to find the balance, to know what the right thing to do is hard. So we need kind of to develop skills in knowing what to do. How to say that, well, this is not our role, so sorry, I cannot help you. And if you do need help, this is where you need to go, and I will support you in doing that. But also then it's, at some other points in time to say, hey, come for a hug. Come for a hug. We can, help you for a day or two, but this is what you need to do after. It's not easy. Now, I'm saying that just in general, because as you said, it's a big question. It's a general question. So it's how to answer it in great details. And then we have, then living here in Australia at the Buddhist Center, over the years, we had, we had people that have gone through difficult times. When we go through difficult times, then we become kind of more irritated or more kind of, we're not doing the right things. We're not kind of acting in a way that accords with the code of conduct. And so if we let that pass in the Buddhist center, things will decline. Now, if we let an abusive behavior remain, if someone is kind of having a bad day, long term, it can be detrimental to a Buddhist center or to any other society or community, that organization, what have you, that we belong to. So, sometimes being forceful is the right thing to do. Maybe not necessarily for the person, but for the group, for the organization, for society, and so forth. And so, I sit up sometimes with the teachers that I've worked with here. Some of them have been quite strong and full on. I've worked with teachers that were really full on. And sometimes when my main work here is a translator. So it's nice to translate for someone that is getting a nice advice. I cringe when I have to translate a scolding or a beating. It's almost like, and some of the teachers I work with can be so straightforward and completely unabashed. But what I see is that kind of from having worked with them is that they, even when they're really kind of out there, wrathful, strong, they're not operating from a viewpoint of vengeance or anger. They have kind of, with being so forceful, there's still kind of the motivating force is compassion for the person, but also the safety and well-being of the community. So it's being able to kind of have a certain appreciation of what could be helpful or useful on the short term, and what's more useful on the long term. On the short term, things might be difficult. So you might do something that is quite forceful, unpleasant for yourself and for the person involved. It might be unpleasant, but long term, it would be protecting others and will be also benefiting others in the community. So then being able to appreciate long term and short term is really important in terms of, I think that the work that you do, as you said, kind of, stopping domestic abuse or other abuse, it's really important.
Excuse me, Venerable. We're a little over time, but Barbara has written into the chat. It's entirely up to you. All
right. When you talk about the imprints of ignorance, it sounds similar to what people sometimes call being triggered. The experience is usually based upon past trauma. If trauma is pre-verbal, then the destructive emotion can arise in the body from a place you cannot access in the moment. How can we get to the root of it? How can we dissolve rather than repress the imprint? The work on this to be done outside of the moment of reactivity. I think that when we speak of imprints, we speak of kind of so actually before I continue with that, Lisa, is that more or less like, does it sound okay? Going in the right direction?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I find that validating, because I guess that's where I know it's a very complex, kind of area, but even you just saying that it is very complex, and yes, we need structures and all of those kinds of things. I guess my thinking is along the same lines, so that's really helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Great minds think alike, but my mind is pretty small. Anyway, so with imprints, I think that there are different levels of speaking of imprints. So kind of the way that I spoke of imprints is somewhat different to, I think, the imprints that you mentioned. So the word imprint has different meanings. In the way that I spoke about it, in that particular context, it refers to imprints that produce appearances. But from another perspective, another usage of the word imprint is in the way that you expressed it. Kind of, there are some situations that arise in us. We have no explanation of what we're experiencing at the moment. It is because imprints that we have accumulated before, traumas that we've accumulated before, not only in this life, but it can also be related to things that we have experienced in previous lifetimes. Sometimes it's just unknown. And so how can we deal with that? I think that first of all, I think that in a sense that psychology has really useful tools to deal with some things which are triggered in us. Like, for example, there are really useful techniques for dealing with, I think, anxiety. I mean, dependent first of all on the force of anxiety. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not work. Sometimes you need to find what is working for you and what is not working for you. So there is, of course, and I'm saying that just as a general comment. So there are things that are triggered, and there are psychological tools that can be used. From a Dharma perspective, I think that what's useful is to develop first of all, certain mindfulness of what's happening now. It's not always, I think that it's not always useful just to be mindful. I think that, for example, when you feel uncomfortable in your body, becoming mindful of the body might not be useful, might actually exacerbate the sense of discomfort. Actually, I think that I need to think of your question more and to think about it kind of in a more kind of organized way to be able to answer it or to give some advice. So maybe, Barbara, if you will, can I keep this question and think about it and maybe go back to it in a previous session? Sorry, not previous, next session. All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Barbara. Are you there?
Oh, yeah, Barbara said, of course.
Oh,
Cool.
all right.
All right, cool. So people, let's leave it here for now. Here actually kind of for me, it's not that late, Barbara. Barbara said that she appreciates me staying late. It's actually here, it's midday, but actually I do need to go and pick up something. So let's leave it here for now. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll meet again next week. And next week, we're going to speak about applying, apart from Barbara's question, we'll speak also about the 4 antidotal powers, and then also the power of aspiration. So let's leave it here for now with making a final dedication and thinking that may we be able to use whatever positive potential we've created together in order to further our spiritual development, mental development. May we be able to practice the 5 powers in the best possible way to create a framework for our spiritual practice, Dharma practice in this life, to make it more efficient and streamlined. And of course, the orientation is to use that to develop Bodhichitta. May the supreme man of enlightenment, not yet born, arise. And may that reason not decline, but increase more and more. Actually, I have some verses that we can recite together. I'll put it on the screen. So thinking of all the positive potential we've created together, may the supreme jewel Bodhichitta that is not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Now, for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and then for the success in all of his activities, in the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain till samsara ends. Sever of the snowland teachings and transmigrated beings who makes extremely clear the path that is unification of emptiness and compassion. To Lotus Holder Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And finally, for the long life of Kyabje Lama Sovereign Pache, and you can also think of all of your other spiritual teachers, Geshe Sherab or whatever teacher you're relying upon. May they have a healthy life and be successful in all of their activities. You uphold the Sibyo's moral way, it says in the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Majina's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the 3 jewels. Several of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Venerable. Thank you.
And I shall see you next week. Thank you very much, Paula, and all the other people. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.